The day I watched my best friend pitch my idea to a room full of investors, I didn't say a word. I just smiled. And let him finish. Because destroying him right there would have been emotional. Destroying him later would be permanent. Ethan and I met in college. Same dorm. Same broke bank accounts. Same cheap ramen dinners at 2 a.m. We used to sit on the cold tile floor of our apartment, laptops open, dreaming about the big thing. The startup that would change everything. We weren't just friends. We were brothers. At least, that's what I believed. The idea came to me during my final year. A scalable SaaS platform designed for small local service businesses, plumbers, electricians, contractors, helping them automate bookings, payments, client retention. Simple. Affordable. Powerful. I still remember the night it clicked. My heart was pounding. My hands were shaking over the keyboard. This is it, I whispered to myself. I told Ethan the next morning. Big mistake. He listened quietly. Too quietly. His eyes didn't light up the way mine did. They narrowed. Calculating. But I ignored it. I thought he was just processing. We started building together. Or at least, that's what I thought. I handled product design, code architecture, back-end systems. I didn't sleep more than 4 hours a night for months. Ethan? He said he'd focus on networking. Networking. Which apparently meant going to startup mixers, investor events, posting inspirational LinkedIn quotes, and talking about our product like he built it. I didn't notice at first. I was buried in code. But then small things started happening. He asked for the full pitch deck file. He asked for access to the early prototype demo. He asked for login credentials, just in case. I trusted him. Why wouldn't I? He was my best friend. Then one afternoon, I got a message from a mutual friend. Bro, congrats. Congrats for what? For the launch event tonight. Ethan's startup presentation? My stomach dropped. My fingers went cold on the keyboard. I called Ethan immediately. No answer. I checked LinkedIn. There it was. Excited to announce the launch of my new SaaS platform revolutionizing local business automation. Not our. My chest tightened. It felt like someone had physically squeezed the air out of my lungs. I drove to the event. Didn't even remember the traffic lights. Didn't feel the steering wheel. When I walked into that conference room, I saw him on stage. Big screen behind him. My UI. My interface. My flow diagrams. My product. And he was smiling. Talking about the long nights he spent building it. Talking about the vision he had since college. Investors nodding. Applauding. I stood at the back. Heart pounding in my ears. He saw me. For a split second, his smile twitched. Then he continued. Confident. Like I didn't exist. Like I never existed. And that's when I realized something. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't ashamed. He wasn't afraid of me exposing him. Because he believed I couldn't. Because officially? There was no paperwork. No incorporation yet. No signed ownership agreements. We were just building. And he moved faster. He registered the company under his name. Filed the LLC. Secured initial angel investment. All before telling me. Calculated. Strategic. Betrayal isn't loud. It's quiet. It's the slow realization that someone you trusted has been planning around you. After the presentation ended, he walked toward me like nothing happened. Bro, you came. Bro. I looked at him. Studied his face. The same guy who helped me move apartments. Who met my parents. Who once cried on my shoulder after a breakup. And I asked one question. When were you going to tell me? He sighed. Not guilty. Annoyed. Look, man, you're technical. You're not business. I knew you'd slow things down. I just optimized the process. Optimized the process. Like I was a bottleneck. Like I was an obstacle. You used my code. Our code. No, I said quietly. My code. He leaned closer. Relax. I'll give you equity later. Once things stabilize. Later. Later never comes. And in that moment, I could have exploded. Could have screamed. Could have exposed him in front of investors. But something inside me shifted instead. Anger cooled into clarity. Emotion turned into calculation. If I attacked him right then, he'd paint me as unstable, bitter, jealous. And investors would back him. So I did something else. I smiled. Congratulations, I said. And I walked away. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was heartbroken. Because I was planning. You see, Ethan forgot one thing. He rushed to register the company. But he never checked who owned the intellectual property. And every single line of code? Every design mockup? Every back-end structure? Was saved, time-stamped, and stored under my personal development account. Including version histories. including metadata, including original commit logs, and more importantly, the core algorithm powering the automation engine? I had written it under a separate private repository, licensed, under my name. Ethan thought he stole my business. What he actually stole was a demo, and I was about to let him build an empire on land he didn't legally own. I didn't confront him again. I didn't send angry texts. I didn't post vague quotes about betrayal. Silence is terrifying when the other person expects chaos. Ethan expected a reaction. Instead, I disappeared. For 3 weeks, I didn't contact him once. And that unsettled him. He messaged first. "Hey man, we should talk." I left it on read. Then another. "Investors want to meet the tech lead." "That's you." "Tech lead. Not co-founder. Not partner. Tech lead." I replied 5 hours later. "Sure. Let me know when." If he thought I was going to beg for my position back, he miscalculated. When we met, it wasn't in our old coffee shop. It was in a polished office space. Glass walls. New logo on the door. His logo. Same product. New branding. He'd moved fast. There were already 2 junior developers at laptops. My system, rewritten just enough to look original. But I could see it. Same architecture flow. Same back-end logic patterns. He hadn't built something new. He'd copied my skeleton and changed the paint. He greeted me with that smooth startup founder confidence. "You look good, man." I didn't respond to that. "What do you need?" Straight to business. He leaned back in his chair. "We're scaling faster than I thought. We just closed 400K seed." He paused, waiting for me to react. I didn't. "I need you on board officially. Investors want stability." "And what am I?" He hesitated. "Senior technical partner. 10% equity." 10% for something I built entirely. I felt heat rise in my chest. But I kept my voice calm. "And the intellectual property? It's company owned now." There it was. The lie delivered with confidence. Company owned. He had no idea. Or maybe he assumed I'd never challenge it. I nodded slowly. "Send the contract." He blinked. "You're in? For now." The relief on his face was almost funny. He thought he won. He thought I surrendered. But I wasn't joining to help him grow. I was joining to gather evidence. Over the next 2 months, I worked quietly inside the company. I fixed bugs, optimized performance, improved stability. Why? Because a weak company collapsing looks like failure. A strong company collapsing looks like sabotage. And I didn't want sabotage. I wanted legal annihilation. Every improvement I made, I documented separately. Every feature request tied back to original repository history. Every investor presentation slide referencing proprietary automation engine, screenshot and archived. Ethan got louder as the company grew. More interviews. More LinkedIn posts. Built from scratch. Late nights coding. Years of vision. He was rewriting history publicly. And people were eating it up. One day, during an investor call, I heard something that made my pulse slow instead of spike. "Slow is dangerous," he said. "Our automation engine is 100% proprietary and exclusively owned by our company." That sentence. That exact sentence. Recorded. Saved. Backed up. Because it wasn't true. Not even close. 3 weeks later, they closed another funding round. 1.2 million. Valuation? 8 million. And that's when I made my first real move. Not a lawsuit. Not yet. First, a letter. A formal cease and desist. From my attorney. Addressed to the company. Citing intellectual property infringement. Including documentation of original code commits. Timestamped development logs. Repository ownership proof. Licensing documentation. Algorithm registration. And one final line. Continued use of the protected software framework will result in immediate legal action seeking damages, equity forfeiture, and injunction. I didn't send it on a random Tuesday. I sent it the morning after their funding announcement went public. Investors were celebrating. Press articles were being shared. And at 9:02 a.m., his phone rang. Then mine did. "Ethan." I let it ring 3 times. 4. 5. Then I answered. "What the hell is this?" he snapped. Calm voice. Always calm. "It's documentation. You're trying to destroy the company." "No," I said softly. "I'm protecting what's mine." He lowered his voice. "We can fix this. We'll renegotiate." "You already negotiated." Silence. Heavy. "You wouldn't dare take this to court," he said finally. That was the moment I knew he was scared. Because confident people don't say that. Confident people say, "See you in court." Scared people hope you won't go. I responded with one sentence. "I've already filed." And that wasn't even the worst part for him. Because while he was busy pitching investors, he forgot something critical. During those first chaotic weeks, before he locked down everything properly, he used my private licensed module. And that license? Explicitly prohibited commercial deployment without written consent. There was no consent. Which meant every dollar raised, every contract signed, every paying client on board, was operating on unauthorized intellectual property. Which meant investors weren't just funding a startup. They were funding a liability. And once investors smell liability, they don't ask questions. They pull money. By the end of that week, 2 board meetings were called. Emergency. I wasn't invited. But I didn't need to be. Because the next call I got wasn't from Ethan. It was from one of the investors. Can we meet? That tone. Professional. Careful. Nervous. I agreed. When I walked into that conference room, Ethan was already there. But he didn't look confident anymore. He looked tired. Sweat under his collar. Jaw tight. One investor slid a folder toward me. We've reviewed the documentation. Another added, if this proceeds to court, we're exposed. Exposed. Such a powerful word. Ethan finally spoke. You're overreacting. We can settle privately. I looked at him. Really looked at him. This was the same guy who told me I was slowing him down. Now his entire empire was paused because of a single signature he never got. You built this on my work, I said calmly. And you erased me. He leaned forward. I'll give you 25%. Not apology. Not ownership correction. Just negotiation. I shook my head. You don't understand yet. One investor interrupted. What do you want? That's when I delivered it. Immediate suspension of product deployment. Public correction of intellectual ownership. 51% controlling equity. Retroactive compensation. And written admission of misrepresentation. The room went silent. Ethan stared at me like I'd stabbed him. You're insane. No. I was patient. And patience is terrifying when paired with evidence. He thought stealing my idea was the bold move. But letting him grow it first? That was mine. And this was only the beginning. Ethan laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was his last defense. You want majority control? You didn't even handle investors. I didn't blink. I handled the product. Without the product, you have nothing. One of the investors cleared his throat. He's not wrong. That shift. That tiny shift in tone. That's when Ethan realized the room wasn't his anymore. Power doesn't disappear loudly. It leaks. And I could see it leaking out of him in real time. The lead investor folded his hands. Legally, if the IP claim holds, and from what we've seen, it likely does, we're funding something we don't own. He looked at Ethan. Did you disclose this? Ethan didn't answer immediately. Silence is confession. He tried to pivot. We built it together. I slid a printed document across the table. Version history. Commit timestamps. Initial architecture drafts with my digital signature. His name nowhere in early development. The investor skimmed it, then looked up. This is problematic. Problematic. Corporate language for, you're screwed. Ethan turned to me. You're really doing this? There it was. The guilt attempt. Like I was the villain for not staying quiet. You did this, I replied calmly. He stood up abruptly. This is betrayal. I almost smiled. The irony. But I didn't. Because this wasn't emotional anymore. This was structural. The meeting ended without resolution. Investors requested a 72-hour review period. Funding disbursement frozen. Marketing spend paused. Expansion halted. That alone cost him momentum. And in startups? Momentum is oxygen. Without it, things suffocate fast. That night, Ethan called again. I didn't answer. He texted. We need to talk man-to-man. Interesting choice of words. Man-to-man. As if this was about pride. I finally agreed to meet him privately. Not at the office. Not somewhere public. He chose our old college bar. Cheap wood tables. Sticky floors. Memory ghosts everywhere. He arrived early. Already halfway through a drink. You're blowing everything up, he said as soon as I sat down. I'm correcting it. You could have just asked for more equity. You could have just not stolen it. His jaw clenched. You think investors care about who wrote the first line of code? Yes. They care about growth. Not when growth is legally contaminated. That word hit him. Contaminated. He leaned in. What do you actually want? He still didn't get it. He thought this was about percentages. Money. Control. But it wasn't just that. It was about erasure. He erased me publicly. So now I was erasing his certainty. I want acknowledgement, I said quietly. Public. Legal. Permanent. He stared at his glass. You'll ruin my reputation. You ruined mine first. That's when he shifted tactics. You wouldn't even have this opportunity without me. That sentence. That exact sentence. The same tone he used back at the launch event. The same superiority. That's when something inside me hardened permanently. I would have had it without you, I replied. You just wouldn't. He scoffed. You're not a CEO. You're right. I stood up. I'm the owner. And I left him there. The next 48 hours were brutal for him. Investors hired independent legal counsel. Forensic code audit initiated. Server access requested. License agreements reviewed. And here's what Ethan didn't know. During those 2 months I worked under him, I never transferred ownership of my private module. Not once. Every deployment used a bridge license tied to my credentials. Which meant I could revoke it. Legally. And on the third morning, I did. Access key invalidated. Core automation engine disabled. No dramatic shutdown. No explosions. Just silence. Client dashboard stopped processing bookings. Automations froze. Notifications halted. Support inbox flooded within minutes. What's happening? System error. Payment stuck. Investors called emergency meeting number 2. This time, panic was visible. Ethan looked like he hadn't slept. What did you do? He demanded. I revoked unauthorized usage. You can't just shut down a live system. I can. It's mine. The lead investor leaned forward. Can this be restored? Yes, I said calmly. Under new ownership structure. Ethan slammed his hand on the table. This is extortion. No, I corrected him. This is enforcement. There's a difference. Extortion threatens something you don't own. Enforcement protects what you do. The investors stepped outside to deliberate. Ethan stayed in the room with me. For the first time since this began, he looked small. Not angry. Not confident. Small. You're going to destroy years of friendship over this. Years of friendship. As if friendship includes secret LLC filings. Secret funding rounds. Public erasure. I didn't destroy it, I said quietly. You did when you decided I was disposable. That word landed heavy. Disposable. Because that's what he did. He optimized me out. But optimization cuts both ways. The investors came back in. Decision made. Funding would resume only if IP ownership legally transferred to me. Company restructured. Public correction issued. Ethan removed as sole controlling authority. In simple terms, he lost control. Not everything, but control. And for someone like Ethan, that was worse than bankruptcy. He looked at them in disbelief. You're choosing him. They didn't respond emotionally. They responded financially. We're choosing stability. That's the thing about business. It doesn't care about loyalty. It cares about risk. And Ethan had become risk. He turned to me one last time. After everything we've been through. I met his eyes. Yes. And for the first time, he had no comeback. The paperwork process began immediately. Lawyers drafting. Equity restructuring. Board votes. But this wasn't over. Because Ethan wasn't the type to accept defeat quietly. And I knew it. The real battle was just beginning. Power doesn't disappear quietly from a man like Ethan. It mutates. For 3 days after the board vote, he said nothing publicly. No posts. No statements. No damage control. Silence from someone that loud? That's not surrender. That's planning. Meanwhile, I was buried in legal calls. Drafts. Equity transfers. IP assignment documents. Investor assurances. On paper, it looked clean. Reality wasn't. Employees were whispering. Slack channels felt tense. 2 junior developers avoided eye contact with me. Because Ethan had already started something behind the scenes. He framed it as loyalty. He's trying to hijack what we built. Subtle. Strategic. Not calling me a liar. Not accusing me directly. Just planting doubt. Doubt spreads faster than truth. One afternoon, I walked into the office and felt it immediately. The temperature had changed. Conversation stopped when I passed. Ethan was standing near the whiteboard, explaining future roadmap direction. As if nothing had happened. As if the board hadn't stripped him of majority control. As if he still ran the place. He made eye contact with me. And smiled. That smile again. But this time it wasn't confident. It was defiant. He was daring me to push further. I didn't react. Instead, I did something he didn't expect. I scheduled an all-hands meeting. Mandatory attendance. End of day. The conference room filled slowly. Developers. Marketing interns. Customer support. Even the operations manager who usually avoided drama. Ethan sat in the back. Arms crossed. Watching. Waiting for me to mess up. I stood at the front. No dramatic speech. No emotional accusations. Just facts. I built the original automation engine before the company was formed. I projected commit logs on the screen. Timestamps. Repository ownership. Licensing documentation. Then I paused. I didn't want this to become public conflict. But clarity protects everyone here. I didn't look at Ethan. I didn't need to. The board has restructured ownership to protect the company from legal exposure. No jobs are being cut. Funding remains secured. Operations continue. Then I added something intentional. Transparency matters. Especially when trust has been broken. That landed. You could feel it in the room. Ethan shifted in his chair. He hated that word. Trust. After the meeting, 2 developers approached me privately. Is this why the system shut down? Yes. Was it unsafe? No. It was unauthorized. Their expressions changed. Not hostile anymore. Just processing. That's when I realized something important. Ethan's power wasn't in intelligence. It was in narrative control. He told stories confidently. And people followed confidence. So I did what he never expected. I stopped playing defense. I hired a PR firm. Discreetly. And within 2 weeks, a carefully worded press release went out. Company undergoes leadership restructuring to strengthen intellectual property integrity and long-term growth. No public attack. No mudslinging. But investors understood the subtext. Industry peers understood the subtext. Ethan understood the subtext. His phone stopped ringing. Invitations slowed. Podcast appearances cancelled. That's when he made his mistake. Instead of accepting minority equity and staying quiet, he tried to fight dirty. Late one night, our support system flagged something strange. A new feature branch pushed into the development environment. Not approved. Not reviewed. And it contained a modified version of the automation engine. A patch. One that removed my licensing dependency entirely. A backdoor rewrite. And only one person had access level high enough to attempt it. Ethan. He thought if he rewrote enough of the structure, he could argue derivative work. He underestimated something. Every single keystroke inside the company's server was logged. Including his. Timestamped. IP address traced. Intent documented. I didn't confront him immediately. I escalated it to the board. Because this wasn't betrayal anymore. This was attempted intellectual property circumvention. Legal consequences just escalated. Emergency board meeting. Again. This time, there was no calm tone. One investor slammed a printed log onto the table. Did you attempt to override licensed code? Ethan tried to defend it. I was protecting the company from dependency risk. Dependency risk. Interesting choice of words for stealing code again. The board wasn't emotional. They were furious. Because now it wasn't just my IP. It was investor liability. Legal counsel spoke clearly. If intent to bypass licensed intellectual property is proven, this exposes the company to fraud allegations. Fraud. That word changes everything. Ethan went quiet. For the first time since this started. He didn't argue. He didn't spin. He just looked, cornered. And I realized something. He never believed I would go this far. He thought I'd settle for revenge. He didn't realize I was aiming for protection. Protection lasts longer than revenge. The board voted that night. Unanimous. Ethan was removed from operational authority. Immediately. Access revoked. Email suspended. Security credentials disabled. He had 24 hours to collect personal belongings. No farewell speech. No dramatic exit. Just escorted out by compliance. And when he walked past my office on the way out, he stopped. Looked at me through the glass. There was no anger left in his face. Just disbelief. How did it get this far? He asked quietly. I stood up. Walked to the door. You took the first step. He opened his mouth to respond. But nothing came out. Because deep down, he knew. He didn't lose because I destroyed him. He lost because he believed he could erase me without consequence. And now? He was out. But here's the part nobody talks about. Removing someone is easy. Living with what comes after. That's complicated. Because power shifts create enemies. And Ethan wasn't just a former founder now. He was a humiliated one. And humiliated men don't always walk away quietly. The day after Ethan was escorted out, the office felt hollow. Not peaceful. Not victorious. Just quiet. Like after a storm where you're still waiting for thunder. His desk was empty. The framed founder photo from our launch event? Gone. But the tension he left behind? Still sitting in the room. I should have felt satisfied. Instead, I felt alert. Because Ethan didn't lose everything. He still owned minority equity. He still had industry connections. And most importantly, he still had pride. And pride is expensive when wounded. 3 days later, I found out just how expensive. One of our clients emailed support asking why a competitor had contacted them directly. A new SaaS startup. Similar pitch. Similar features. Aggressively discounted pricing. I checked the website. New brand. Different logo. But the automation flow screenshots? Uncomfortably familiar. Not identical. But inspired. I dug deeper. Domain registered 2 days after Ethan's removal. Incorporated under a different LLC. Guess who was listed as strategic advisor? Not CEO. Not founder. Strategic advisor. Smart. Technically distanced. Legally insulated. But the fingerprints were obvious. He couldn't beat me inside the company. So he tried to compete outside it. Now here's where most people would panic. Start a price war. Rush product releases. React emotionally. I didn't. Because competition is legal. But stealing derivative architecture tied to protected IP? That's not. I hired a digital forensic analyst. Not a lawyer first. An analyst. Within a week, we discovered something critical. The competitor's platform made API calls structured exactly like my original architecture. Same call pattern. Same automation sequencing logic. Same backend response hierarchy. You can rewrite code. But logic patterns? Those expose origin. It was subtle. But it was there. And the final confirmation? The metadata inside one forgotten JavaScript file. An internal comment. // temp fix, adjustment. He forgot to remove that. That was enough. I didn't confront him directly. I didn't send threats. I filed for preliminary injunction. Quietly. And here's the twist he didn't expect. I didn't sue his new company immediately. I sued for breach of fiduciary duty during his time as co-owner. Because if he used insider knowledge or proprietary frameworks to build a competing entity, it wasn't just IP infringement. It was violation of corporate obligation. That carries heavier consequences. Court filings became public record. Industry blogs picked it up. Not dramatic headlines. But serious ones. Former startup founder faces fiduciary breach allegations. Investors hate lawsuits. Investors especially hate lawsuits involving founders trying to launch competing ventures under investigation. Within 30 days, his new startup lost 2 early-stage backers. Then 3. Then silence. The competitor's website quietly removed feature screenshots. Then the pricing page. Then went into maintenance mode. That's when he called me. Not angry this time. Not aggressive. Just tired. You're ruining my career. I leaned back in my chair. You ruined it the moment you decided integrity was optional. You could have just let me move on. You could have built something original. Silence. He exhaled slowly. You won. That word. Won. He still thought this was a game. This wasn't about winning, I said calmly. It was about ownership. There's a difference. Winning is emotional. Ownership is permanent. A week later, his new startup dissolved. Officially. Quietly. No public apology. No dramatic confession. Just paperwork filed. And then? He sold his remaining equity in our company at a discount. Because legal pressure drains resources fast. Board approved the buyback. And just like that, Ethan was completely out. No shares. No control. No narrative. The company? Stronger than ever. Revenue doubled within 6 months. We expanded into 3 new markets. And every time I saw our logo displayed at a conference booth, I remembered that night in the back of the investor room. When he smiled like I didn't matter. That smile built this entire outcome. But here's the truth no one expects. Revenge doesn't feel explosive. It feels quiet. Controlled. Measured. There was no shouting. No dramatic collapse. No public humiliation scene. Just contracts. Evidence. Patience. And one final moment. Months later, I ran into him at a tech networking event. He looked different. Less polished. Less certain. We made eye contact. For a second, it felt like college again. Before ambition. Before ego. Before betrayal. He walked over. Congrats, he said. No sarcasm. Just acceptance. Thanks, I replied. We stood there awkwardly. Then he said something unexpected. I underestimated you. I nodded. I know. And that was it. No handshake. No reconciliation. Just closure. Because sometimes the most satisfying revenge is letting someone live with the knowledge that they tried to erase you. And instead, they made you stronger. I didn't destroy him emotionally. I destroyed the illusion that he could take what wasn't his. Legally. Permanently. Quietly. And that silence? That's louder than any revenge speech ever could be. You'd think that after he was gone, it would feel clean. It didn't. Because when someone you once trusted tries to erase you, it changes something permanent inside your wiring. For weeks after Ethan exited completely, I found myself double-checking everything. Contracts, access permissions, investor emails, even casual conversations. Trust became procedural, not emotional. And that's the part nobody prepares you for. Revenge solves injustice. It doesn't restore innocence. The company stabilized fast. Faster than even I expected. Without Ethan's constant spotlight chasing, decisions became quieter, sharper, more strategic. We focused on product integrity instead of optics. Customer churn dropped. Referrals increased. The irony? The moment we stopped pretending to be impressive, we actually became impressive. But growth attracts attention. And attention attracts questions. At a major SaaS conference 6 months later, I was invited to speak on founder conflict and intellectual property protection. The moderator introduced me as the co-founder who legally reclaimed his stolen company. That sentence echoed in my head. Stolen. Reclaimed. It sounded dramatic. But sitting under those stage lights, I didn't feel dramatic. I felt older, wiser, and slightly colder. After the panel, a young founder approached me. Nervous. Maybe early 20s. My co-founder registered our domain behind my back, he said quietly. I don't know what to do. For a split second, I saw myself in him. Same confusion. Same disbelief. Because betrayal doesn't feel like war at first. It feels like misunderstanding. Until it isn't. I gave him one piece of advice. Document everything. Don't react emotionally. And never assume friendship equals protection. He nodded like I'd just handed him something valuable. Maybe I had. That night in my hotel room, I thought about Ethan for the first time without anger. Not as an enemy. Not as a rival. But as a lesson. He didn't wake up one morning planning to betray me. Ambition distorted him slowly. Opportunity tempted him. And the absence of boundaries enabled him. But here's the part most people won't admit. If I hadn't protected myself legally, he would have won. Not because he was smarter, but because he moved first. Speed beats innocence every time. Unless innocence becomes strategy. A year after everything settled, the company crossed 8 figures in valuation. Not because of hype. Because of stability. And one afternoon, during a routine legal audit, our attorney said something that stuck with me. You handled this the right way. Most founders would have gone public and messy. You went procedural. Procedural. It sounds boring. But it's lethal when done right. There's a quiet power in patience. A power Ethan never understood. He relied on charisma. I relied on documentation. Charisma fades under scrutiny. Documentation doesn't. Sometimes people ask me if I regret not exposing him publicly in some explosive way. Doing interviews. Naming him directly. Burning him socially. I don't. Because humiliation is temporary. Legal precedent is permanent. And the most satisfying part? It wasn't watching him escorted out. It wasn't seeing his competitor fail. It wasn't buying back his shares. It was the moment I realized I didn't feel angry anymore. That's when you know you've actually won. When you don't need the other person to lose further. When the scoreboard stops mattering. I didn't destroy him. I forced accountability. There's a difference. And if there's one thing this entire experience taught me, it's this. Never let betrayal rush you into reaction. Let it sharpen you instead. Because when someone builds their success on stolen ground, you don't need to burn it down. You just need to prove who owns the land. And once you do, the structure collapses on its own. The anger left first. That surprised me. I expected rage to linger. To echo. To flare up randomly. But it didn't. What stayed instead was something heavier. Suspicion. It crept in slowly. At first, it was small things. When a team member laughed quietly across the office, my brain would whisper, "Are they talking about you?" When an investor asked an innocent clarifying question, I'd feel my chest tighten. Are they questioning your competence? It wasn't paranoia. It was hyper-awareness. Betrayal rewires you. Because once someone you trusted proves capable of calculated deception, your brain stops assuming good intent. Even when there's no threat. Sleep became lighter. Not restless, just alert. I'd wake up at 3:17 a.m. almost every night. No nightmare. No specific fear. Just awake. Mind running through scenarios. What if someone else registered a patent quietly? What if a developer is copying code? What if another co-founder situation is forming and you're missing it? I'd sit in the dark, staring at the ceiling, replaying the past like a forensic analyst reviewing footage. The launch event. His smile. That word, optimized. I started questioning every memory. Was he always like that? Or did I ignore signs? And the worst question of all? Was I naive, or was I arrogant? Because sometimes we trust people not out of kindness, but because we believe we can't be fooled. That thought hit harder than the betrayal itself. One night, I opened our old college photo album. Dorm room. Pizza boxes. Laptops open. Ethan's arm around my shoulder. We looked unstoppable. Young. Hungry. Genuine. I zoomed in on his face. Trying to see if the ambition was already there. Trying to spot the fracture before it formed. You won't find it. That's the cruel part. People don't look like villains in origin stories. They look like friends. And that realization did something subtle but dangerous. It made me withdraw. Not publicly. Not dramatically. But internally. I stopped sharing early-stage ideas with anyone. Even trusted executives. I'd polish concepts alone first. Draft strategies privately. Test features quietly before announcing them. Because the subconscious voice kept repeating. Don't give anyone the raw version. That's when they take it. Control became comfort. But control also isolates. My operations head, Maya, noticed it first. You don't delegate like you used to, she said casually one afternoon. I delegate plenty. Not creatively. That stung. Because she was right. Creative delegation requires vulnerability. You have to show someone something unfinished. And unfinished things can be stolen. Even when that's irrational. Maya leaned against the doorway of my office. You know not everyone is Ethan. I know. Do you? I didn't answer. Because knowing something logically doesn't mean your nervous system agrees. A month later, I snapped at a junior developer. He'd pushed a minor update without notifying me first. Not malicious. Not secretive. Just a communication oversight. But when I saw that unscheduled commit notification pop up, my pulse spiked instantly. Cold hands. Tunnel vision. For half a second, I was back in that conference room watching my product on a screen without my name attached. I called him into my office. My tone was sharper than necessary. Why was this pushed without my approval? His eyes widened. I thought it was within scope. It was. And I knew it. But my brain wasn't reacting to logic. It was reacting to memory. After he left, I sat there staring at the door. Ashamed. Not because I was wrong technically. But because I was becoming rigid. Hyper-controlled. That's when I realized something unsettling. Ethan didn't just try to steal my company. He altered my internal architecture. And unlike code, psychological changes don't come with version history logs. You don't see the exact moment you shift. You just wake up slightly different. More guarded. Less open. More strategic. Less trusting. At a leadership retreat months later, we did an exercise. One question stood out. What fear currently drives your decision-making? Everyone else gave predictable answers. Market volatility. Scaling too fast. Competition. When it came to me, I paused. Because the real answer felt too exposed. Betrayal, I finally said. The room went quiet. I hadn't meant to say it out loud. But once I did, something clicked. The fear wasn't that someone would outperform me. It was that someone would stand next to me, smile, and calculate how to replace me. That kind of fear doesn't make you weak. It makes you strategic. But strategy without trust becomes isolation. And isolation at the top is dangerous. Because you start believing only you see clearly. Only you protect correctly. Only you anticipate threats accurately. And that's a slow path toward becoming exactly what you once fought against. Controlling. Secretive. Defensive. The irony was brutal. I defeated Ethan legally. But psychologically? He left fingerprints. One evening, I received an unexpected email. Subject line. I owe you an explanation. From Ethan. My heart rate didn't spike this time. It slowed. Steady. Controlled. I didn't open it immediately. Just stared at the notification. Because part of me didn't want closure. Closure removes the villain. And when the villain disappears, you're left alone with the changes inside yourself. I finally clicked. The message was long. No excuses. No manipulation. Just reflection. He admitted he felt overshadowed by my technical ability. Admitted he rushed registration out of fear I'd leave him behind. Admitted he convinced himself it was protecting momentum. He wrote, I didn't think you'd fight back. I thought you'd just walk away. That line sat heavy. Not because it hurt, but because it revealed something. He underestimated me. Not my intelligence. My threshold. He believed I wouldn't defend myself fully. And for a long time, maybe I wouldn't have. If this had happened 3 years earlier, I might have left quietly. Started over. Avoided conflict. But growth changes thresholds. Pain changes thresholds. I closed the email without replying. Not out of bitterness. But because some conversations don't repair anything. They just reopen layers you've already sealed. Later that night, standing alone in the office overlooking the city lights, I asked myself something uncomfortable. If I hadn't documented everything, if I hadn't moved legally, if I had confronted him emotionally instead, would I have lost? Yes. And that realization brought something darker. Relief. Because I won. But what if next time, someone smarter moves first? That thought lingered longer than I liked. And that's when I understood. The battle wasn't with Ethan anymore. It was with the version of me that now saw threats everywhere. The version that scanned for betrayal before collaboration. The version that equated vulnerability with risk. And I had to decide something quietly that night. Was I going to let one betrayal define my leadership style forever? Or was I going to evolve past it? Because revenge is one chapter. Identity is the rest of the book. And I wasn't done writing mine. For weeks after that email, I kept thinking about one sentence. I didn't think you'd fight back. It echoed in my head in ways I didn't expect. Not as an insult. As a mirror. Because if I was honest with myself, there was a version of me that wouldn't have fought back. A version that would have said, it's fine. I'll just build something else. A version that confused peacekeeping with strength. That version died the night I watched him pitch my idea. And death, even metaphorical, changes a person. I started noticing how I entered rooms. Shoulders slightly tighter. Voice slightly firmer. Pauses more deliberate. People treated me differently now. Not as the quiet technical brain. But as the founder who legally crushed his co-founder. That reputation carries weight. Respect. And distance. At another industry mixer, two founders were whispering when I walked by. One of them said, not quietly enough. That's the guy who sued his best friend. Not protected his IP. Not reclaimed ownership. Sued his best friend. Narratives are slippery. Even when you win, people choose the version that fits their worldview. For a split second, I felt anger rise. Then something colder replaced it. Indifference. Because I realized something dangerous. I was starting to prefer being feared over misunderstood. Fear is efficient. You don't have to explain yourself to people who are cautious around you. You don't have to over-clarify intentions. But fear also builds walls. And walls, once built, are hard to dismantle. Back at the office, Maya knocked on my door again one afternoon. You're different lately, she said. Different how? Effective. But distant. I'm focused. You're guarded. There it was again. Guarded. That word kept following me. She stepped further inside. You built this company on integrity, not intimidation. I'm not intimidating anyone. You don't have to raise your voice to intimidate people. That hit harder than she probably intended. Because she was right. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't aggressive. But my presence carried an unspoken message now. I won't hesitate. That's powerful. But it's also isolating. That night, I did something I hadn't done in months. I turned off my phone completely. No notifications. No Slack. No investor emails. Just silence. And in that silence, something uncomfortable surfaced. Without constant activity, without legal battles, without growth metrics. I felt empty. Not depressed. Just still. And in that stillness, I realized something terrifying. The fight had become addictive. The strategy. The anticipation. The calculated moves. It gave me clarity. Purpose. Focus. When everything is a threat, your brain is sharp. When everything is stable, your brain has room to wander. And wandering leads to reflection. Reflection leads to vulnerability. Vulnerability feels unsafe after betrayal. So subconsciously, I kept seeking new battles. More audits. More restructuring. More risk assessments. Because if I stayed in fight mode, I didn't have to process the emotional cost. A week later, during a routine board call, one investor said casually, "You've become a shark." He meant it as praise. But it landed strangely. Sharks don't build ecosystems. They dominate them. After the call, I sat alone in my office staring at the city skyline again. And I asked myself something brutal. If Ethan walked in today, genuinely remorseful, genuinely changed, would I be capable of forgiving him? The honest answer scared me. No. Not because I still hated him. But because forgiveness requires softness. And softness felt like vulnerability. And vulnerability felt like risk. And risk was how this all started. That realization hit harder than the betrayal itself. Because it meant he hadn't just changed my business trajectory. He altered my emotional tolerance. I used to believe conflict could be resolved through conversation. Now I believed conflict should be preemptively neutralized. That shift is subtle. But it's heavy. A few days later, something unexpected happened. One of our senior engineers made a mistake. A costly one. A deployment oversight that caused temporary client disruption. Nothing malicious. Just human error. Old me would have sat down with him calmly. Talked it through. Understood the root cause. Knew me? My first instinct was documentation. Liability assessment. Written acknowledgement. Procedural protection. I caught myself mid-email draft. Staring at the tone. It sounded clinical. Detached. Cold. And suddenly I saw the trajectory clearly. If I continued like this, I wouldn't become Ethan. But I'd become something adjacent. A leader driven more by prevention of betrayal than by cultivation of trust. That's when I made a decision that felt harder than any legal filing. I scheduled a one-on-one with that engineer. Not to discipline. To talk. When he sat down, he looked nervous. Expecting reprimand. Instead, I asked, "What happened?" His shoulders dropped slightly. He explained the oversight. Took responsibility. Apologized. And for the first time in months, I felt something different inside me. Not suspicion. Not calculation. Just understanding. Humans make mistakes. Not all unexpected actions are betrayal. That distinction is critical. After the meeting, I walked back to my office and realized something profound. The real battle wasn't about protecting my company anymore. It was about protecting my ability to trust selectively. Because if you lose that, you win externally and lose internally. Later that evening, I opened Ethan's email again. Reread it. Not as a threat. Not as a reminder. But as a closed chapter. He underestimated me. Yes. But I also underestimated how deeply this would reshape me. And that reshaping wasn't entirely negative. I became sharper. Stronger. More aware. But strength without flexibility becomes brittle. And brittle things crack under unexpected pressure. So I started adjusting. Not by becoming naive again. Not by lowering standards. But by separating caution from cynicism. Caution protects. Cynicism isolates. There's a difference. Months passed. The company thrived. Internally, I softened slightly. Delegated more creatively again. Shared early ideas with leadership. Not blindly. But intentionally. Trust became structured. Not assumed. And one quiet night, standing alone in the office once more, I felt something I hadn't felt since before the betrayal. Peace. Not because Ethan lost. Not because I won. But because I wasn't scanning the room for invisible threats anymore. The darkest part of betrayal isn't the act. It's the aftermath inside your own mind. And surviving that? Without becoming the thing that hurt you. That's the real victory. 2 years later, the company had grown beyond what I ever imagined. Global clients. Multiple offices. Teams expanding faster than I could manage. And yet, every time I walked past the old investor boardroom, memories lingered. Ethan. His smile. His overconfidence. The calm assurance he could erase me and get away with it. I'd thought I'd left him behind. I hadn't. Because ghosts don't leave quietly. One afternoon, a familiar name appeared on my calendar, Ethan. No explanation. Just, meeting request, Ethan L. My first instinct? Ignore it. Second instinct? Check legal filings. Nothing new. Third instinct? Curiosity. Because the human mind has a way of tricking itself into needing closure, even when closure doesn't exist. I agreed to meet. We chose a neutral location. Small, upscale cafe. Dim lighting. Tables spaced far apart. He arrived early. Nervous. Casual clothes, but the tension in his shoulders was obvious. I waved. He Saturday. We stared at each other for a beat. Then he said the words I'd been waiting to hear. I underestimated you. Completely. I nodded. You did. He swallowed. I want to make it right. I raised an eyebrow. By what? Apologizing? Offering shares? Coming back? No, he said quietly. I want to show you I've changed. I want to do something honest. Something that proves I'm not that person anymore. I studied him. For the first time, I didn't see arrogance. I saw fear. Genuine fear of his own past actions. He reached into his pocket and slid a small envelope across the table. I opened it slowly. Inside, a USB drive. Attached note. I've been working on a platform. Completely my own idea. No IP stolen. Just wanted you to know I can do this honestly. I didn't say anything immediately. Instead, I leaned back. Measured. Calm. Why now? I asked. He met my eyes. Because I had to fail to understand what I lost. You didn't just win legally. You won morally. And that's something I can't fake. Silence. I processed. This was different from the battles of the past. This was accountability. And for the first time, the image of Ethan as my adversary started to shift. I realized he hadn't changed because I forced him. He'd changed because he had no other choice. No shortcuts. No stolen ideas. No confidence shield. He had to face his own reflection. I closed the envelope. You've come a long way, I said. And yet, I continued, voice steady, some lessons can't be unlearned. I'll trust your work, but trust isn't given lightly anymore. He nodded. I know. And I accept that. We stood. Shook hands. No smiles. No drama. Just acknowledgement. Walking out of the cafe, I felt lighter. Not because I forgave him completely. Not because the past disappeared. But because the dark, gnawing weight of revenge and vigilance had finally transformed into something manageable. Something I could control. And that, I realized, is the real power. To win legally, emotionally, and psychologically, and still retain your humanity. The company was thriving. Investors were confident. Clients were loyal. Growth metrics were off the charts. And yet, the ghost of Ethan still lingered. Even after legal battles, revoked access, destroyed competitor attempts, and buyback of his shares, part of me remained alert. Hyper-aware. Suspicious of every decision, every interaction. Betrayal leaves fingerprints that don't wash off easily. Then one evening, months later, a notification popped up. Ethan had requested a meeting. No context. Just my name, his name, and the words, "We need to talk." Curiosity won. I agreed. The meeting was at a neutral cafe. Small tables, dim lighting, distance between each pair. He arrived first, slouched slightly, nervous. Not the arrogant man who tried to erase me, but a humbled version, eyes wary, hands fidgeting. "I underestimated you," he said immediately. No smirk. No excuses. Completely. I want to make it right. I studied him. I could feel every ounce of past betrayal, every calculated lie, every moment he thought he could erase me. Now, there was only fear. Fear of himself. He slid a small envelope across the table. I opened it. Inside, a USB drive and a note. "I've created a platform of my own. No stolen code, no shortcuts. Just proof I can do this honestly." I stared. The old anger didn't rise. The adrenaline didn't spike. Instead, calm. Measured. Precise. "Why now?" I asked. "Because I failed," he said quietly. "I saw what I lost. You didn't just win legally, you won morally. And that's something I can't fake." Silence. I realized then, Ethan hadn't changed because I forced him. He'd changed because he had nowhere to hide, nowhere to cheat, nowhere to blame but himself. I closed the envelope. "You've come a long way. But some lessons, they can't be unlearned. I'll watch your work, but trust isn't given lightly." He nodded, accepting it. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. Just acknowledgement. The kind that finally closes chapters. We stood, shook hands, and walked away. No smiles. No dramatic scene. Just the quiet weight of what had been settled. And as I walked back to my office, something unexpected happened. I realized the darkest part of betrayal isn't the act itself. It's what it does inside you afterward, hypervigilance, suspicion, the gnawing need for control. Surviving that, while maintaining your humanity, that's the real victory. Because I didn't just win against Ethan. I survived him. And in surviving, I became stronger, wiser, and unshakably focused on what really matters, my company, my integrity, and my future. No dramatic humiliation. No public collapse. Just permanent accountability. And that, in the end, was far more satisfying than any revenge could ever be.